If you are on the fence and you're trying to decide between public school and homeschooling, there are three things I would love for you to think about before you make that decision. My name is Allison Morrow, and I'm a homeschool coach and founder of Good Schooling. And I know that when you start looking into homeschool, it can be very overwhelming. But there are three specific things that if you really think these through, not just in the perspective of how does this affect your child, but how does it affect your family, then I think it will make it much easier for you to make that decision. So the first contrast between homeschooling and public schooling that I'd like to talk about is that homeschooling is strength-centered, whereas public school is program-centered. Now, I'm a former educator. I used to work in elementary and middle schools in public and private. And one of the things that I learned very quickly is that the curriculum was the boss. We didn't get a lot of choice, and we had to do things on a certain timeline because we needed to get them done by Christmas or by finals or by testing in the spring. And it didn't give me a lot of opportunity to focus on what my kids were really good at and then leverage those to help them learn the things that they were struggling with. The curriculum drove everything. I didn't get to make a lot of decisions. However, when you are homeschooling, you can focus on your child's strengths. Yes, there are things that of course you're going to want them to learn, even though it's not necessarily something they're naturally good at. But when you're homeschooling, the boss is you, not the curriculum. You get to decide, what are we going to learn? How are we going to learn it? And by leveraging your child's strengths, you're going to be able to make those more difficult or less interesting to them topics a lot easier to manage. But specifically, that idea of being the boss of your own homeschool is huge. It is one of the major differences between homeschooling and public school, and one of the biggest reasons why I know so many families choose to homeschool. The second difference between the two is that homeschooling is very life-centered, whereas public school is very schedule-driven. So when you step foot that first day, kindergarten, when you first step foot into public school, it becomes the boss of your schedule. Weekends are only fun because you don't have school, right? Mondays are awful because you do have school. Fridays are great because it's the last day of the week. Summers are awesome because you don't have school for a nice long stretch, but you don't necessarily get to go on vacation when you want to, when the weather is a little cooler or when it's not as busy, because the schedule says you need to be in school from August 15th to whatever, right? When you are homeschooling, you get to decide the pacing of how quickly or how slowly you work through the material. You get to decide when you're going to stop. You get to decide when you're going to start. You get to decide what days you want to take off. It doesn't matter if it's snowing. It doesn't matter if it's gorgeous outside. A lot of us take off sunny days because particularly in the winter, you don't necessarily get as many of those. And so if you suddenly have a gorgeous day when it's like 30 degrees warmer than it has been, we say, put the books away. Let's go outside, right? But when you're in public school or any conventional school setting, you don't get to decide as a family what pacing is going to work for you. Maybe you or your spouse has a busy season at work, and man, if you could just pull back on school a little bit during that 1 month, it would make things so much easier. But you can't do that in public school. You don't get to decide what kind of schedule you want to keep. Maybe you have a spouse who does a lot of travel, and you would love to be able to take off the time that they're home or be able to minimize what you do when they're home because you know that you get so little time together as a family. But when you're in the public school, it doesn't matter. Kids have to go to school, and you can't necessarily keep excusing them just because, well, but it's a week that dad's home and he's not going to be back again for like a month. When you homeschool, you get to center your homeschool around your life. You get to work your child's education around what's going on in your family instead of trying to work your family around what's going on at school. The third way in which homeschooling and public school are so different is that homeschooling is very individual focused And public school, conventional school, is very conformity focused. When you go to public school, you're not going there to find your own individual strengths. You're not going there to have somebody help you figure out, what are you good at? What would you excel in? How can we help you build your particular strengths and interests and help you round those things out? When you go to public school, you're learning how to fit in. And it might not necessarily be what the curriculum is trying to teach, but it's definitely what the social experience is, right? The kids that stick out in public school, not usually a good thing, right? They don't typically enjoy standing out. They want to look like everybody else because the kids who stick out are the ones that get hammered down. And the curriculum is not written or approached in a way that is going to look at your child and say, okay, how do you learn best? How do you connect with this information? How can we make this relevant to you? Instead, it says, we don't care what your life is like outside of this school. We don't care what your strengths are. We don't care what your level of interest is in this. Today, we are all doing the exact same thing. We are all turning to page 300 and we are all going to read these paragraphs and we are all going to do this project. And it doesn't matter if you're dyslexic. It doesn't matter if you are gifted. It doesn't matter if you are dyslexic and gifted. You have to do the exact same thing that everybody else is going to do. And when you do take those steps for those kids who really do need that help, when you take those steps to try to get them that help, the help is only given to help them fit into the classroom. It's not given to help them learn what their strengths are and how they can approach this education in a way that is going to work with the way that they have been wired. It's all about making them fit in. But when you homeschool, you get to look at your child and say, oh my gosh, you are so gifted in these things, and it is so cool to see how much you enjoy doing this and doing this and doing this. How can we capitalize on that? How can we make this a focus of what we do so that you not only get to engage in something you enjoy, but you get to learn other things through it? Or we get to learn about things that are relevant to what is going on right now in your life so that those lessons really stick. When you homeschool, you get to focus on the uniqueness of your child, on the unique way that they have been wired, on the way that they have been built, their strengths, their weaknesses, their interests. You get to make those things a front and center focus instead of expecting them to look and act and think the exact same as everybody else. If you're starting to think that homeschool might be the best fit for your family, then I would love for you to read my article on deschooling. Deschooling is the single most important step that you can take before you start homeschooling. And it can also help you to figure out the answers to some of those things that you might still be questioning and struggling with as you start to move away from conventional school. I've put a link to that article down below. It also has a resource, free resource that you can download that will help you to further deschool yourself, which is kind of like detoxing yourself from the conventional approach to education so that you can unlock your true homeschool potential and set yourself up for true homeschooling success. Remember, you can homeschool and good schooling can help. Thanks so much for watching. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you found this helpful, and I look forward to helping you even more on your homeschool adventure. I'll talk to y'all later. Take care. Bye.